Hello and welcome to Well Played. I'm your host Bluetongue from around Sydney, Australia. I am also joined by our hosts. Firstly, from Gladesville, we have Bauxite. How are you, Baux?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, Blue. I've been spending a lot of time on our Minecraft server with Mrs. Bauxite. It's been a lot of fun. Yep, that's basically it. I haven't done really much else.
Have you been constructing within your Minecraft server?
Oh yeah, a whole heap of automatic things. So we have an automatic pumpkin farm, an automatic iron farm, basically so that we have resources when we're not actually playing, which is weird because that's what we spend all of our playtime doing is finding ways to get stuff when we're not playing. So yeah.
Okay. And have you constructed your own computer within the game yet?
No, that's Mrs. Bauxite's thing. I wouldn't be surprised if she did do that eventually, though.
Ah. From Canberra, we have Crystal this week. How are you doing, Crystal?
Yeah, pretty good. Been watching the coverage coming out of Gamma Trade Show this week. A lot of interesting board games coming out this year.
Cool.
Pretty pumped.
So I am not aware of this Gamma Trade Show of which you speak.
So Gamma Trade Show is like where a lot of the publishers and distributors come and kind of speak about what's coming up for them and where their other games are going, whether there's expansions, blah, blah, blah. And it's typically aimed at media rather than individual people like a convention. So like Board Game Geek and the Dice Tower were covering it live, which was really cool.
Nice.
Great way to watch.
Yeah. Did they stream it on Twitch or something like that?
They didn't stream it on Twitch. BGG streamed it through their website, so boardgamegeek.com, and the Dice Tower streamed it through YouTube on the Dice Tower channel.
Are there VODs and stuff? I assume there would be, of course.
Yeah, so what the Dice Tower did is for each company they spoke with, so they live streamed it, but then they edited it post and put up each company's video as their kind of 10-minute, this is what they discussed and this is what they showed.
Cool.
Which is really cool. Yeah.
Was there anything that really caught your eye?
Yeah, actually, AEG is bringing out some standalone Guildhall games in kind of an expansion-esque type thing. So they've got 3 boxes planned in a fantasy setting, and each of the 3 boxes come out month by month, and like the second one will build on the first one, and then the third one will build on the second one and first one respectively. So that should be really interesting because apparently you can mess around with the classes and they kind of evolve throughout the 3 boxes.
Cool. Is it like a type of role-playing game or?
Guildhall?
Yeah.
It's kind of a tableau management interaction game. Bauxite, have you played Guildhall?
No, Crystal. I haven't actually even heard of it. Sorry. So.
Ah. Actually, conveniently, in my new place, my board game shelf is right next to me. Guildhall is a game by Hope S. Huang by AEG. There's 6 different roles within the game, and you have to kind of collect people of those roles, of those professions, into your Guildhall, and that's how you earn victory points, and naturally, most victory points wins. I find it a really good game to play with myself and my partner. I don't often get it out to play with more than 2, but I find it really enjoyable. Okay, the other big news was Asmodee North America is changing their distribution model. So this was rumored earlier in the year, and they properly announced it at Gamma Trade Show. So what they're doing to try and fix some of the issues with the board game distribution industry and online sales is that they're going to, for all of their distribution methods, each retailer will have a retailer ID, and that ID will be linked to whether they're an online retailer or a brick and mortar store retailer. So what they'll be able to do is adjust the price of their wholesale based on whether the retailer is brick and mortar or online. So what they're going to do is cut out the deep discount retailers that are selling their products for significantly lower prices, making it harder for brick and mortar stores to compete with.
Okay.
So
I can understand that, but the part of me that wants, cheap games doesn't really like that idea.
I think it's a step in the right direction in terms of benefiting brick and mortar stores, but unless this has like a broader adoption by a number of other distribution companies, I can't see it necessarily benefiting Asmodee in the end.
Yeah.
So I think they're taking a really huge risk to try and change what is a significant problem. Because, yeah, you're right. You go for the cheapest price for the most part. Unless you're in your store and you go, oh, that's a great game, I'll pick it up. It seems reasonable.
Yep.
I don't mind paying a little bit extra to pick it up in store, assuming it's a reasonable margin. But if I'm paying it much more than 20 Australian dollars more to buy it in store, I'm just not going to buy it in store. I'm going to go online.
Yeah.
Look, a large part for me, I have no problem paying more to support a brick and mortar store if that brick and mortar store is worth supporting.
Yeah.
There is one particular place I have in mind. I got burned so many times for that shop. The owner was a complete... He was a complete... To be perfectly honest. When I ordered things, he would make me prepay.
Yeah.
And then he wouldn't call me when it came in. And then if I didn't pick it up fast enough, when I don't know they're not in, he would sell them to somebody else and keep my money.
That's dirty.
Yeah, it is. It was really... And that's not the only thing he did. I've got a whole list of grievances against this fella. And it's not the whole shop. It's just the guy who owns and runs it. So
Wow.
the chain of shops that he belongs to, generally speaking, are fantastic.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, he was the only board game shop in my entire area.
Yep.
And there was nothing I could do. What was I going to do? Travel an hour to the nearest one? No, that's stupid. So, look, I have no problem with online shops existing. I have no problem with them selling for less. Because if your brick and mortar shop is worth supporting, people will support it.
Yeah.
Especially when they're, raking in the cash from the magic addicts.
How long are you clean now, Bauxite?
Ooh, from the beginning of the year at least. So
you're 3 months clean, man. Going strong.
No. I mean, when I say clean, I mean I'm clean. I have 2 cards. I have a Force of Nature from Revised, which was the first rare card I ever got. And I have a commander card. I don't know why I have it. It's on my desk. Yeah, anyway.
After having to move my entire Magic card collection, I wish my collection was that small.
Yeah, I sold mine for much less than it was worth to Mega Games in Penrith. So
yeah.
They were all right. They gave me cash.
All right. Well, at least that's done with. From the hills, we have Harrow. How are you doing, Harrow?
I'm doing well, thanks, Blue. I learnt yesterday that the new Killing Joke animated movie will be voiced by Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. This makes it my second most anticipated movie of the year now. So happy.
Yes. Mark Hamill does excellent voice work.
Especially for Joker. He's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, don't undersell Kevin Conroy. He's a great Batman, too.
Cool.
Oh, look, I'm actually thinking this will be the best DC movie of this year.
It has the potential to be great source material, great talent. This could well beat Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad. Yeah. Anyway, how you doing, Blue?
I'm doing pretty well. I've been sinking a lot of time into The Division this week, which is fun in the most part. Oh my goodness. It's the PvP area is intense. You're constantly, second guessing people around you and getting murdered by people and stuff like that. It's a little bit, frustrating at times. I've been really excited about the new Hearthstone expansion. They've got they announced it this week. It's called The Old Gods. And it's essentially a Cthulhu-style based expansion for Hearthstone, which is a lot darker than the sort of light-hearted, jovial stuff they typically go for. And so far, they've only like pre-announced like, I don't know, half a dozen cards. But the upside is it looks awesome. The downside is that it's still more than like a month away, which is a really long time. So,
Sorry, how long do we have to wait for a new Star Wars movie?
I don't know. There's another one coming out this year, though, isn't there?
No, they knocked back Rogue One a bit, I heard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess I have it better than the Star Wars fans, but at the same time, it's a little bit frustrating. What is really cool, though, they've done a cross-game achievement thing where if you level up a character from 1 to 20 in World of Warcraft, you get a new portrait for a paladin in Hearthstone, which is really awesome. I started leveling up a new character almost straight away and then realized that I had a character sitting at level 17. So I'll be doing that this evening.
Oh dear.
I'm in two minds about that. I do not want to have to play Warcraft in order to advance my Hearthstone.
Yep, I understand. There's a lot of people that have a similar feeling to that. As in, I was watching a pro Hearthstone player basically log into WoW for like the first time, create a character, and like 50 people were around him, like showing him what to do. And he's like, so I can just join a group and then put myself on follow, and if you guys just keep killing stuff, that'll level me up. Cool. Thanks, guys. It was funny.
That's reasonable.
Yeah. It was almost as bad as watching all the pros and the people who, really didn't need the cards get bought like 50 or 60 packs of cards at a time by fans who just wanted to see them open packs of cards in Hearthstone while the beta was out. So frustrating. Yeah. So that's been my week. Oh, yeah. Aside from the fact that I also spent most of the weekend in hospital with my wife, who, broke a toe. That took quite a long time to deal with, so that was also why we ended up cutting our last week's episode short. So, as a quick explanation of what this podcast is about, Well Played is a podcast about sharing comic books, graphic novels, movies, TV shows, computer games, and board games we enjoy with our listeners. For those of you who are already aware of the subjects, hopefully we can give you a deeper insight into what it's about. So, without further ado, let's get stuck in. Alright, so our first topic for this week, and by first I mean only topic for this week, is the board game Seven Wonders. Now, Seven Wonders is arguably a board game. It can also be referred to as a card game because it's mainly card-based. And it was released in 2010 and designed by Anton Bounzer, who also designed Takenoko and Samurai Spirit.
And also every other good game.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, he's prolific.
He is an amazingly good designer. I would love to meet him in person. Now, Seven Wonders is a drafting game, which, for those of you who don't know what drafting is, essentially all it is taking a big stack of cards, distributing them evenly between a group of people, and then you look at the cards that you've been given, you choose one, and then pass the rest of them to the left. So the game's as much about choosing the correct card as well as being aware of what other people are choosing and how they're playing the game and knowing what cards you're giving to them at the same time. So there's a really heightened level of awareness that you need to have to be really good at this game. But it's relatively straightforward. And it also gives everyone something to do all the time, which is one of the really positive aspects of the game. Now, the setting itself is in ancient, I guess you'd call it Europe and Middle East. There's a few other wonders from Asia and around the world. And essentially, it's each of the players plays one of these civilizations, building a wonder, and you use the cards that you collect in the course of drafting through the game to build your wonder and collect resources and battle your neighbors. Interestingly, you can't battle everyone in the group. You can only battle the people who are literally adjacent to you. So it's not too competitive in that regard. The game itself is mostly focused on the actual drafting mechanics and which cards you're collecting. Some cards have a point value attached to them, and unsurprisingly, the person with the most points at the end of the game is the winner. So the game itself has 4 expansions. The first expansion is called Cities, and that actually adds an extra player, and that brings the player count up to 8, from 2 to 8 players, which is really versatile, really good for a small or large group of people. The second expansion is called Leaders. It's actually probably my favorite. It's got a lot of character to it, and there's a whole bunch of historical characters who've had... you basically do another drafting round and choose out the leaders that'll give your civilization an extra bonus in a certain area, be it military or science or civic development or something like that.
Or even pacifism.
Yes, that's a thing too. There's also some peace tokens you can get so that you don't have to take part in the conflict at the end of each round. The third expansion is called Babel. Now, honestly, that's the one that I've played the least. There's sort of 2 different modules to that, and I've only really played with one of those modules. There's another module which sort of involves building up a tower hence the title. So, essentially, that one is just introducing some new aspects to think about in the game, in addition to everything else that's going on. And the final and most recent one is called Seven Wonders Duels, and it's not really an expansion so much as a standalone game, which is specifically designed for 2 players, which sounds really interesting. I've not actually played that, though. I know for a fact that Bauxite owns a copy and has quite enjoyed his plays of it so far. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Baux?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Mrs. Bauxite and I have played a lot. The drafting mechanic is completely different. Rather than passing cards between the 2 of you, a lot of them are laid out in a pattern on the table, and there might be, say, a diamond shape, and each layer of the diamond conceals the cards in the layer above it. So by taking a card, you reveal 2 new cards. So that might be a strategic choice. Do I take this one, which means my opponent has the opportunity to do something special? Or should I take this other one, which is less good for me, but then it's also less good for them? So you're sort of making the same style of decision. Yeah, but it is mechanically fairly different in its execution. A lot of things are still very similar. The way it scores is very similar. But there's another thing. There's another thing.
I've also played the Seven Wonders Duel, and I find the military mechanic to be far more engaging with Seven Wonders Duel. So how military works, rather than just at the end of the age that everyone kind of battles each other, it's this ongoing tug of war between the 2 players, which I find just so much more. It just gives a lot more urgency to military, which you kind of tend to associate with war. Yeah. As opposed to a kind of flat structure in Seven Wonders.
So, as I recall, it's like a scale, and it sort of starts tipping in one player's favour, and the other player has to sort of, get it back to the middle or in their favour. And the further it goes in either direction, then the worse the penalty is, or the better the bonus is for that player.
Yeah, so the first time myself and my partner played it, I won during the last age through a military victory. So I had pushed the marker so far towards my direction that he couldn't come back from that, essentially. So it kind of adds another almost timed element to it. Because if you let your opponent run away with their military victories, they'll just crush you.
Yeah. Whereas that in the 2 to 8 player version, the game itself really lends itself to wholeheartedly embracing a particular strategy, be it science or military plus civic, or trying to... actually, that's basically the only 2 strategies that I've seen successfully implemented. I guess you could blend a little bit of science and military, but that's a bit more uncommon.
Does science not work in your groups?
What tends to happen is that someone will start off getting science, and then 2 or 3 people will be like, no way are you getting any science, and basically filter out all the science from then on. No one tends to get enough to actually run away with it.
Yeah. Mostly, usually the winner of the games that I've seen of late have been well diverse players who have invested smartly in the stuff that they've gotten, but they also get like an extra bonus on top of that, be it a guild or a particular leader or something like that, which gives them an edge over everyone else. So that's often, I find, the winning strategy per se. But the difference between the duels and the two-player version of normal Seven Wonders is essentially, with the two-player, you play with a dummy hand, and that dummy hand has cards sort of arbitrarily taken out of it, so you're not really sure what is coming to you. And it can be a little bit strange, I guess, in that you'd expect certain cards to probably go within 1 or 2 turns, but in this case it may not be, given that the dummy hand only has certain cards taken from it in a certain pattern. I guess randomly would be a better description.
Well, it depends how you play it. There is a rule set where the control of the dummy hand alternates between the 2 players.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That sounds interesting.
Still, Duels is a much better 2-player game.
Definitely. I find the third dummy player, as a concept for making a 2-player game, really clunky in all the versions of games that I've played for 2-player where there's a dummy third player.
Yeah, I've honestly never played this with 2 players. I like, the appeal of it is playing it with a big group of people to me, and getting to see everyone's interactions and try to finish off their wonder and construct their civilization. It's endearing in that way. It's sort of in the same way that a game like Civilization on the computer or something like that is endearing, in that you're creating a society and stuff like that, which is exciting and fun.
Blue and Crystal, have either of you played normal Seven Wonders 2-player?
Yes.
No.
I've got a question. A game that I really liked that one of our other hosts wasn't too crazy about was Splendor. And the reason it worked for me is when you play 4-player, there is a lot of turnover. You have to be adaptive. You've got to respond. When it's 2-player, slow turnover. You can play the long game. You can plot. You can scheme. Is it the same with Seven Wonders? Because you're going to see the 7 cards. You can plot ahead for what you want to do.
Yes and no. I think it's a lot harder to plot because it's a bit more obvious, and with Splendor there's a bit of setup and restriction in terms of what gems you're collecting, and that's a bit harder for your opponent to control. But if your opponent works out what you're trying to do, then they can easily just take one of the cards that you were hoping to get later on from the dummy hand and pretty much stop that in its tracks.
Okay. So it's easier so in 2-player, planning ahead's good, but it's it's really easy for your opponent just to throw a spanner in the works.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Cool. A question for Bauxite and Crystal: how is the Seven Wonders Duels game in terms of replayability? Is it different each time you play it?
Yes, absolutely. It's just as replayable as the normal Seven Wonders game. They've done a really good. They've set it up really well in that regard.
Awesome.
I would echo that. I mean, I don't own it and I've only played it a couple of times, but it looks like just as replayable as Seven Wonders.
Yeah. So normal Seven Wonders, as referenced by Bauxite there, is replayable by virtue of the fact that each time that you play, you get a different hand of cards, which is exciting. That'll often determine the strategy. The first 2 or 3 hands that you get will be pointing you in a certain direction, in addition to the fact that your civilization will often point you in a certain direction as well. So you might have, bonus military in your civilization, or you'll have bonus science or some bonus resources in your civilization. And each time you get to play with a different one means that you'll be trying to do something slightly different. In addition to the fact that you've then got, varying numbers of players, you've got different leaders and other things that are involved if you're playing with the expansions as well. So it's extremely replayable. I've honestly never really felt like the game became stale for me in terms of the what's the word? The variation that you would get from game to game. Whereas a game, comparatively speaking, a game like Broom Service is going to be pretty similar each time that you play it. It's always going to, everyone starts down that certain corner and everyone starts making their way in their chosen direction and trying to collect their potions, and the interactions will be very similar, whereas it tends to change a lot in Seven Wonders depending on what civilization or cards that you get. Now, what negatives do you guys think come into play about this game?
For me, teaching new players, man. I hate it.
Yeah.
I found people who play their first game of Seven Wonders really only figure out what's happening at the end of the third age. And then in retrospect, they're like, oh, okay, well, you did tell me that science was super valuable, but I didn't expect to get completely, didn't expect you to mop the floor with me and get, 40 more points because I invested in these two things that do not generate points at all. Cool.
Yeah.
That interaction has happened way too many times for me. So the first time people play, just not understanding, even if you explain the rules, the way it comes together is a bit more complex than the mere, hey, just take one card out of this thing of 5 that people pass you and then pass that on.
Yeah. Often I'll get questions when I'm playing that first game from those players saying, what card should I take? And I can immediately look at what they've got and what card that they've got the option of and say that that one is clearly the best choice. 90% of the time there is clearly a good choice, whereas some of the time you'll have to make a strategic decision in relation to it. But knowing what that choice is takes a little bit of experience.
Yeah.
So I guess this also comes down to if they're new to drafting as well, because I think some of that is solved if they're not new to drafting. So if you are going to teach Seven Wonders and you're a bit worried that the player's going to struggle, then starting out with like a Sushi Go type where it's just drafting and there's not a lot else happening can be a step into this, though it is pretty light.
Yeah. Harrow, did you have something negative that you were thinking about in terms of Seven Wonders?
I find the game a bit too simple. Doesn't really get my grey matter going.
Okay.
That's just me.
Yeah. What could you refine your definition of simple for me?
I wait for. I see the cards, I see what I have. I'm generally done within a couple of seconds because, as you say, 90% of the time it's obvious. You're done. I've played it a number of times. I know what I'm doing. I can win at this game. I don't suck at it. And you're waiting forever. Even though everyone goes at the same time, you're waiting, and then it's your turn again, and you only think for a few seconds, and then you're done. And because it's all moving so fast, I can't really do any long-term planning. Most of my opponents are too far away. I can't play to counter someone I think is definitely winning, or it's very hard to do that. Oh. Yeah, you can't play the table. You can only really play yourself.
I would disagree with you there in terms of how you manipulate the hand of cards that you get. So, just say an opponent is clearly starting to pull ahead, just say in science, or just say they're starting to pull ahead in terms of the number of military units that they have, and they're clearly dominating their neighbors and getting a lot of bonuses out of the military. When you see that card that comes up, which is going to clearly benefit them, you then throw that into your wonder, or you play that yourself and take the bonus away from them. So I had one really interesting experience with Seven Wonders, and it was a really highly competitive game that I played down at PAX a couple of years ago. They had a tournament where I sat down and played a sort of essentially a competitive game with a bunch of really experienced players. And I was expecting to do pretty well, and I feel like I did. However, there was the problem in that game that you can basically get screwed by your neighbors sometimes. So whereas
the only ones that can screw you, really.
Yeah.
You can't be screwed by in a 7-player game. The guy that's 3 seats away from you can't really do anything to you, and you can't do anything to them when they're clearly pulling ahead.
Yeah, or aside from pulling cards out, but other people are doing that all the time as well. So in a game that large, you're often having to, play for your own benefit rather than trying to deliberately stymie someone else. And what happened to me in that game was one of my neighbors invested way too heavily in military, like tons and tons of military units, and there was no way for me to compete realistically without over investing in military. And he lost. He lost convincingly. He came last out of that entire group. However, that also had the downside of pulling potential military points away from me and his other neighbor. So essentially that resulted in everyone actually being fairly well balanced. I was only a few points behind the general sort of par average score. And the person who won that game was ironically a brand new player. Well, that's what he said anyway. And he won it by virtue of the fact that he pulled a guild that was just perfect for him. It was worth about 13 points for one card, and that gave him a massive advantage over everyone else, which essentially it feels a lot like the winner in that game was a little bit arbitrary and randomly chosen. So there's a good chunk of random chance to this game once all the player skill levels are balanced. So, yeah.
Arguably, that card should never have been passed to him.
If
it was in his opening hand, I guess that's hard to control.
I did see the card. It actually, I had the opportunity to take it away from him, but at that point of the game, I didn't really consider him a threat. He was actually significantly behind everyone before he pulled that. And like I said before, in order to be competitive, it wasn't a matter of simply causing him to lose. It was a matter of trying to get myself to win at that point.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunately how that game went. But it was interesting. I think realistically, if we were trying to truly gauge people's skill in that environment, it would have been a series of games. And the highest score after 5 games is the actual person who goes through to the next round or something like that.
Yeah, or the average score over 5 games.
What do you guys think are some of the best features of this game? What are the positives?
It's really good in a large group. You get 7 or 8 people. This game is much better in 7 and 8 than a lot of other games that will go that high.
Yeah, the key reason for that is that turns are played simultaneously, so that you're only as slow as your slowest player, but you're not waiting for every single person to make a decision in series. It's all done in parallel, which is fantastic. So if one person's struggling, you can say, hey, Harrow, you're taking too long. Hurry up. And
that's not fair. Rule 2 doesn't mention Harrow.
What about you, Crystal? Do you have a particular aspect of this game you find particularly
Unfortunately,
pleasing?
not much more to add. This one particular I grab out at 5 players because 5 players is a really awkward number. Most games sit comfortably at 4, so whenever there's that extra person, it's kind of hard to find something that'll suit the group, especially I find that usually when we do have 5, one's not as familiar with board games in general.
Cool. Yeah. Often, there'll always be... I've played this a lot of times with new players. There's always seems to be someone who doesn't have that much experience with the game. It's rare that you'll get a group of everyone being experienced. Alright, so aside from those points, the game is also icon-based, so there's very, very little text to the game. Some of the icons take a bit of interpretation, which can be a little bit tricky, and you obviously have like your reference guides and stuff like that for that sort of problem, but generally speaking, it's pretty easy to understand exactly what each of the cards does, and it's simply a matter of asking other people, because there's not really any point in hiding your hand from other players. And if you're a new player and asking what other people think about a particular hand or what a card means, then it's fairly straightforward and easy to do. It's not going to ruin the game by showing other people what's in your hand, because they're going to have that hand themselves in a few seconds. So we've got a question here as well, and it's basically asking us, for those of us who suck at this game, what are the tips for the end game? So, Bauxite, do you have any tips for the end game?
Ooh, I mean, that's where it all, that's when the rubber hits the road, really. I would say look for a guild that helps you, or a guild that hurts your opponents. So, basically, if by taking a card you screw your opponent up more, I would say that's the way to go. And by round 3, H3, you should be able to look at each card and assign a points value of that to every other player and go, okay, this one's worth 7 to me, and it costs me 2 victory points to get because I need to spend some resources, but it's worth 9 to Blue, and he's winning, so I'll take it because, yeah, I would say just look at every card, calculate its value.
Yeah.
That's the best way to go.
Something a lot of people tend to miss is the fact that each card in that final round has a quantifiable value, and you taking that specific card, or you being able to calculate that on the fly, means that you'll be able to make the correct mathematical decision. There is a correct card to take for each hand, generally speaking. So, yeah, just keep that in mind when you're looking at the handful of cards, and there's that guild that looks really amazing, but that other one is just worth a straight up 7 points, and the 7 points just might be better than the guild that looks amazing. Harrow, did you have any tips for new players?
New players?
Well, for the end game for new players.
Or the end game for bad players.
The first couple times I played, I got stuck right at the end because I didn't have enough money to buy the things I wanted. I went too military, too sciencey right at the beginning, and then by the end I couldn't afford to build much of anything. So be sure you've got a decent bank by the end of round 2 so you can buy what you need coming into round 3.
Yep, absolutely. So that interestingly, I think that round 3, like Bauxite said, is where the rubber hits the road. It's the round in which everything you've done up to that point in the game is going to be reflected in the choices and the options that you have. So if you've made sound strategic decisions up to that point, you'll have a lot better foundation on which to build that final round and collect the most points from the cards that are available to you.
Even if you haven't made sound strategic decisions, you can sometimes pick up a guild that will go, hey, you know those ridiculous cards you've got this whole game? They're now worth points. You win.
Yeah.
So it all just depends what lands in the deck. Sometimes, because those guilds can be very variable, you've got no idea what's going to be in there at the start of the game. Until you pick up your hand, you've got no clue what's in there.
Yeah, you cannot count on guilds being in the game for the final round, which is kind of unfortunate. They're the most valuable cards, but it also at least causes people not to go for the same strategy every time, knowing that a guild will be available at the end to reinforce that strategy. All right. So when you start out playing this game, you'll often be tempted to take all the resources. You're told at the start of the game that you're going to need resources to build things later, but there comes a point at which you won't need any more. And some people continue collecting resources after that point, and that can be really detrimental to your score at the end of the game. So just be aware that it's a game of you want to have just enough resources. If you can get by with just this many, and make up the little bit of difference that you've got with coins and trading from your neighbors, then that is often the best way to go in terms of trying to be an effective player at this game.
I'd say that it's not just having the right amount, but also having a varied selection.
Yeah.
You'll find that later in the game, hey, I haven't needed bricks all game. My wonder didn't need bricks, but suddenly I've got this card that needs 3. Well, that's going to cost me an absolute truckload to buy from my neighbors, and I'm suddenly poor. I find that having a nice selection helps, guard against that sort of thing happening. But it also means that you're more likely that your neighbors will be buying from you and pouring money into your coffers the whole game, which is pretty valuable.
Yeah. There's some really cool trade aspects to this game as well. So essentially, when you need extra resources for a card that you want to build, you can just pay 2 gold to your neighbor and borrow one of their resources for a round. That's essentially how it works. And they still get to use that resource as well, so you're not sort of stealing it from them. It can't be used as a negative thing, but you get to give them gold. They enjoy getting gold, and you get to borrow their resources, which is really helpful, and sometimes in filling in the gaps that you might have in your stockpiles. So another thing that people would tend to do when they start out playing this game is they tend to start being overly competitive with their neighbors. So, especially when it comes to military, at the end of each round, you compare the military value of your own civilization and that of your neighbors. And that can be really negative if you're trying to just one-up them all the time. You'll often find that there comes a point at which essentially, if you've got more than, say, 4 military cards in your civilization, unless there's a really good reason why you've done that, that is a really bad thing. More than 4 is too many. Those are things you should be spending on more resources. They should be spent on more points. They should be spent on more effective trading.
I wouldn't say necessarily a certain number of cards, but I'd say if you have at any point in time with the military, you only ever want to have 1 more military than your neighbors. You don't want to have 7 more military than your neighbors, because that's just as effective as 1 more.
Yep, absolutely.
But by the same token, though, if I've found in the past that by round 2 I can be 5 ahead of the neighbours, and they just don't even bother trying by the next rounds, and then I don't have to invest anything else in the future.
Yes, but you may have overinvested in that, up to that point.
Yeah, but round 3 is where all the points come in. So if they think they've got no chance and will just pass on the military, I can focus on the guilds and the big point cards. It has worked for me in the past by just scaring them, by dominating them in round 2.
Yeah, essentially you can pull that off. There is the potential to get bitten by that strategy. There is a particular card in the cities expansion that has 5 military on it. So they can go from only 1 or 2 to more than you have when you thought you were safe with 5. So
yeah, there was one round you and I played where I think the person in between us got peace in the 3rd round. So you were competing with me for military. Now I hadn't competed for military much at all during the game, and you were on 5. And in the last round, I pulled 2 3-value military cards and managed to steal victory from you in that last round. Now,
I remember that round.
Yeah, there was a glass of water in the way, and you didn't really see my military. So
it was hidden military. Thanks, Bauxite. Thanks.
Well, I could
dirty tricks for experienced players.
Well,
hide your cards from the neighbours you're competing with.
On the other hand, you didn't look.
I did look. I just didn't see them. All right.
No, that was a bit
underhanded.
I wouldn't say underhanded. I'd just say it wasn't good sportsmanship.
I didn't mind. So those are tips for new players. I didn't really intend to go into that much detail on strategy in this game. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about in relation to this game and how it's designed and with the selling points?
The only other thing I'll say is it's won a bunch of awards, so obviously the gaming world seems to think it's all right. So in 2011 it won the Kennerspiel des Jahres, and 2010 it won Best Game of the Year from Dice Tower, and Golden Geek Award for 2011.
Yeah.
So some pretty big titles. So if you're unsure, give it a crack.
Yeah. It's probably not leaning towards the more creative player. So the people who like games like Apples to Apples and sort of
namby-pamby wishy-washy games.
Yeah. That don't involve hard numbers.
No, that's not the word. I'm pretty sure it's namby-pamby wishy-washy.
Often they won't find this game as appealing, as there's distinct strategy and there's like hard numbers that you need to be mentally calculating while you're playing the game. So it might not appeal to those people, but at the same time, it's definitely worth a go. If you have the opportunity to at least play it once, then you might find it appeals to you regardless of what kind of background you've got in games. What other games can you guys think of that are sort of similar to this?
So I mentioned earlier Sushi Go, which is my go-to. I want to teach someone drafting. It's so much more simpler than Seven Wonders because you're not having to think necessarily quite so long term. but it's a good introductory to the drafting mechanic.
Cool.
I'd say maybe Dominion, because you've got more chance when someone is clearly getting ahead, you can snipe the cards they want. Yeah, again, like Crystal said, it's a good introduction to the drafting mechanic, and it's got some really and the cards have some really interesting mechanics, especially the later expansions, which will affect your neighbors as well.
It's a unique game, and without like directly reskinning it, I cannot think of a good way to implement a lot of the design features that he's incorporated in this game. So there's the whole everyone's participating at the same time part of the game. There's the mathematically competitive side of the game as well. And then there's a lot of character to it, which I find really appealing. It's the kind of thing that I find a lot of people who enjoy games like Age of Empires or Civilization might find, immediately appealing from a board game standpoint, without having that, 4-hour investment that a lot of those big civilization building games might have.
Thanks for joining us this week. We hope you've enjoyed yourselves as much as we have. You can catch us on Twitter at wellplayedau. You can send us questions, comments, or abuse at wellplayedau@gmail.com. And if you like us, please leave us a 5-star review.
Cheers.